I think what the actual final vote in Brexit shows more than anything else is that a lot of the policies associated with globalization, in particular free trade, more immigration, have been met with certain groups of the population with a lot of resistance. They're actually quite angry about these programs. And I think it makes a lot of sense what happened in terms of the vote for Brexit. And I think it's increasingly we'll see these more nationalistic, anti-immigrant, anti-trade type votes across the board in almost all of the advanced countries. One of the big problems economists have had, especially, is that these policies they've been advocating, more trade, more immigration, I agree that overall they make the size of the pie larger and are the right policies in the long run. But economists have increasingly just ignored the distributional consequences of these programs and of these policies. In particular, they very negatively affect certain groups of the population. We now have just solid evidence of that. So for example, in the United States, we know counties that used to produce goods that end up being exported by China have been devastated. You see higher suicide rates, you see higher opioid addictions, and economists kind of have this way of thinking about the world, well, everything will just sort itself out. If we make the pie larger, everyone will be fine. And of course, that's laughable, and we know that now, and we're seeing the consequences of that. Economists may not be the best people to be thinking about how to redistribute after these policies, but they at least should point out that certain groups of the population are going to be quite negatively affected by certain policies, in particular trade, and in lesser circumstances, I think, immigration. I also think it's very hard to put a number on feelings of anxiety, on feelings of that you're losing your country to foreigners. These things may matter a lot more than just a paycheck. And in fact, even if you look within these counties or within these areas of England that voted very strongly in favor of Brexit, oftentimes there is an auto plant for, let's say, Nissan there. But oftentimes the people who are actually voting against being within the European Union, voting for Brexit, were people that don't get jobs there or can't get jobs there. They're mostly unemployed people. So I think we have to be careful, and I bet you the people that actually work at those plants did vote against Brexit, vote in favor of staying within the European Union. If you actually look at what the effect of immigration has been on the United Kingdom in general, there is, I think, solid evidence that the influx of Eastern European immigrants, especially people from Poland, have kept down wages at the low end of the labor market skill level. I know just anecdotally, if you go to London to any restaurant, I go there quite often, basically almost the entire wait staff at almost any restaurant is from Eastern Europe. Any influx of low-skilled labor that comes into a country will tend to depress wages in that sector. And I think there is evidence in the United Kingdom, wage growth has been terrible over the last 10, 15 years. And I think people have increasingly pointed to the fact that there's been this influx wage growth, I should say, especially at the low end of the skill level. And I think there is pretty solid evidence that that is linked to immigration coming in from Eastern Europe. So there is some rationality to that, where people are saying, look, our wages are being depressed by immigrants. There is some evidence of that in the United Kingdom, I think. The European Union, in my opinion, has followed just really terrible policies over the last 5 to 7 years. The way that peripheral countries who have too much debt have been treated, for example, is frankly outrageous, with richer countries basically bailing out their own banks and then blaming the people in Greece and Portugal and Spain for having too much debt. I think people are looking at this process and claiming that it's undemocratic, and I think it is undemocratic. It has been used to serve the interests of some countries over others, and I think Brexit is in part a reflection of that, and I think you will increasingly see pressure from countries on the periphery which are saying, look, the people in Britain understand what's really going on here.